All right, let's dive in. We're about to look at the Bible in a way you've probably never seen it before. Not just as a collection of separate stories, but as one single, unified story about a war. An unseen, cosmic war that's been raging since the very beginning of time. So, what if all those stories we know so well, the Garden of Eden, the Tower of Babel, even the final battle of Armageddon, what if they aren't just isolated events? What if they're all connected battles, chapters in one grand supernatural conflict? Well, that's the big idea we're going to unpack today, using the biblical text as our map. Now, to understand any war, you got to know who the players are. The Bible talks about this heavenly family, a kind of court of divine beings called the Divine Council. You can think of them as God's royal cabinet, these powerful beings who are involved in running the cosmos right from the start. And you see this council in action right there in Genesis chapter 1, when God says, "Let us make humankind in our image." That plural, well, it's not just a fancy way of talking. This is Yahweh speaking to his council, laying out his plan to create humanity to be his representatives, his imagers, right here on earth. The plan was for a unified, divine, and human family. But as you know, that plan faced rebellion almost immediately. This story really unfolds as this series of, well, cascading failures. It starts in Eden, right? Humanity rebels. Then you get to Babel, where instead of spreading out to fill the earth with God's glory, people huddle together to build a tower and make a name for themselves. And this leads to a massive decision that totally sets the stage for the rest of the war. Okay, this is where things get really wild. According to the book of Deuteronomy, after the rebellion at Babel, God essentially disinherits the nations. He divides them up and puts them under the authority of members of his own divine council. Then he carves out one nation for himself, Israel, to be his personal foothold on earth. The problem? A lot of those divine rulers got corrupted. They led the nations astray, and their territories became enemy territory. So this corruption, it didn't just happen in some vague spiritual realm. It created actual enemy territory on the map. And for the ancient Israelites, that enemy had a very distinct geographical and supernatural headquarters. They called it the foe from the north. For an ancient Israelite, the word north was absolutely terrifying. I mean, literally, it was the direction their worst enemies, like Assyria and Babylon, always invaded from. But supernaturally, it was even darker. The north, or Safan in Hebrew, was the location of Mount Safan, the mythological home of the storm god Baal. It was seen as the enemy's command center, their council seat, a place connected to the realm of the dead. It was enemy headquarters, plain and simple. And this deep-seated dread of the north gets baked right into end times prophecy. So when the prophet Ezekiel describes this final apocalyptic invasion led by a figure named Gog, where does he say he's coming from? You guessed it, the heights of the north. An ancient reader would have understood immediately. This wasn't just about troop movements. This was the final supernatural assault from the very heart of the enemy's kingdom. And all of this brings us to the most famous battle in history. One that, let's be honest, almost everyone gets wrong. It's time to remap Armageddon, because this isn't about a valley, it's about a cosmic mountain. We've all heard the name, right? It comes from the book of Revelation. It brings up these images of a massive final clash between good and evil. But the author, John, he gives us a very specific clue. He says the name Armageddon is Hebrew. And that right there, that's the key to unlocking the whole thing. So the common idea, the one you always hear, is that Armageddon refers to a real place, Megiddo, a famous battlefield in northern Israel. But does that actually fit the evidence in the Bible? Let's take a closer look. Okay, here is the big twist. It all comes down to the Hebrew. What we read as Armageddon is how a Greek speaker would have written the Hebrew phrase Armageddon. Now, Har is easy. It means mountain. But here's the problem. Megiddo, as the Bible itself tells us, is a flat plain, a valley. The real clue is a different Hebrew word that sounds almost the same, moed, which means assembly. Armageddon isn't the mountain of Megiddo. It's the Har Moed, the mountain of assembly. And where do we find that exact phrase? Bam! Isaiah 14. It's in this taunt against the king of Babylon, who's really a stand-in for the ultimate supernatural rebel. And what's his big goal? To climb up to heaven and set his throne on the Har Moed, the mountain of assembly, to literally take over God's cosmic throne. That's the real goal of the war. So let's put it all together. The Battle of Armageddon is not some random fight in a valley in northern Israel. It is the final, desperate charge of the forces of darkness against God's own headquarters on earth, his cosmic mountain, his city, Mount Zion, Jerusalem. They're coming for the throne. But this assault, this final charge, it is absolutely doomed to fail. And its failure leads to the ultimate resolution of this whole cosmic war, the complete restoration of God's original plan, a global Eden. The climax is just explosive. The returning Jesus, who is incarnate Yahweh, shows up with the armies of heaven. And get this army isn't just angels. It includes loyal divine beings and glorified human believers. They confront the enemy right there at Jerusalem, and the rebellious divine rulers are finally and permanently thrown down from their thrones for good. And the result of this victory? It's a complete undoing of all the damage from the war. Every curse that came from the fall is reversed. Sickness is gone. Creation is at peace. The nations that were disinherited way back at Babel are finally healed and brought back into the family. And the tree of life is once again available to all of humanity. And this is why it all matters. The point of the whole story isn't just about escaping a bad world to go to a good place called heaven. It's about humanity finally inheriting a restored creation, finally taking up its role in God's divine human family council, ready to rule and reign right alongside him. The Bible's final vision of this new creation ends with one of its most powerful and, honestly, kind of cryptic lines, "And the sea was no more." You see, in the ancient world, the sea wasn't a place you went on vacation. It was the ultimate symbol of chaos, of death, of the untamable. So for the sea to be gone, it signifies the final state of everything, perfect order, total peace, and the complete, unshakable, eternal presence of God with his family. The war is over. Eden is finally restored.